Axios ran a story on how getting the water out of the hydrants in Pacific Palisades was more complicated than it seems. I'm sure it's very complicated. That's why I pay 13% of my income in the state every year to people who I assumed were working on things like this. You know what the absolute worst thing for the environment is? Wildfires. A 22 study found that the smoke from just the two in 2020 wiped out 18 years of carbon reduction in the state, which means we suffered the pain of driving those early model Priuses for nothing. California is the place that spends money and gets nothing, which is why you may have noticed when the fires broke out, no one escaped by...
Imagine a prominent left-leaning analyst unexpectedly shifting tone and sharply criticizing California leadership for allowing a state celebrated for its coastline and natural beauty to slide into staggering costs and recurring crises. What started as a discussion about wildfire response quickly transformed into a pointed critique of administrative failure. It is rare to see someone associated with that political camp openly question how public funds are being spent. Yet the moment felt like a clear demand for responsibility cutting through years of political noise.
That's undeniably true, that LA is built in a stupid place to build a city. When asked why so many of the hydrants in the Palisades ran out of water, Governor Newsom said the local folks are trying to figure that out. Yeah, you gotta do that before the fire. I've heard people say, do you want to pay more taxes to fund this? No. I want you to use the exorbitant taxes you already collect to prioritize it. We have the highest marginal tax rate in America, higher than almost all other states, and soon Greenland. What is included for that? Breadsticks? Because it clearly doesn't cover fire. That's government's job. Protect us from crime, violence, theft, fire. At least in the Palisades, the hydrants were still there. 300 other ones around the city are just gone, stolen for parts. One of the 3 reservoirs for the Palisades was offline at the one time of year when it was most needed. LA's Mayor Karen Bass, the Nero of American politics, was fiddling in Ghana while the city burned and later placed the blame on 8 months of negligible rain and winds that have not been seen in LA in at least 14 years. Yeah, that's not that long a time. Maybe look in the history books to see how our ancestors handled it.
The contradiction is striking. For decades, many voters supported layers of regulation and expanding agencies, believing they would ensure stability and fairness. Now some of those same supporters express frustration as bureaucracy appears overwhelmed. However, critics argue that this pattern did not appear overnight. Concerns about budget overruns, inefficient oversight, and political blame shifting have surfaced repeatedly over the years. Those who treat the current situation as isolated may be overlooking a long history of similar debates.
The good news is our fire chief is a lesbian. Am I against a lesbian being chief? Of course not. Do I think a lesbian can do the job? Of course I do. And maybe she's the best person for the job. Or maybe they really wanted a lesbian in that job, and she's just the best lesbian for the job, and with essential services, that's not good enough. Crowley's official bio says Chief Crowley leads a diverse department, creating, supporting, and promoting a culture that values diversity, inclusion, and equity while striving to meet and exceed the expectations of the communities. Well, you didn't exceed my expectations, which was that the whole city wouldn't burn down. But it's telling that diversity is mentioned twice before we get to while striving to meet expectations. Now, can you do 2 things at once? Yes. But it matters where your head is. Deputy Chief Kristen Larson said this, which would sound kind of racist if a Southern sheriff said it. Who teaches people this bullshit? No one cares what someone looks like when they're pulling you out of a burning house. Larson also seems to believe that if a female firefighter can't pick up a man, it's his fault. She said, he got himself into the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a...
Predictably, the backlash arrived almost instantly. Calls for greater accountability were met with fierce resistance from partisan defenders. In certain circles, questioning established leadership is interpreted as disloyalty rather than civic engagement. The reaction highlights how polarized the conversation has become. What should be a discussion about governance and effectiveness often turns into a struggle over ideological loyalty and narrative control.
Highest price when politicians don't prioritize basic services. The first responders are heroes who every time go above and beyond because they have to, because we leave it all to them. Now, is wokeness the main reason for the fires? Of course not. But it's also not wrong to associate some of the unforced errors our government made with the things normies see as hallmarks of uber-progressive politics. Questionable budget priorities, high taxes that get you nothing, making everything about identity politics, virtue signaling overseas instead of tending to the nuts and bolts at home. Cali has no shortage of safety commissions and agencies and bureaucrats and regulators, and of course, sign language interpreters who communicate with their face. Common sense? We better get some of that back soon, because wildfires in California are like boob jobs in a strip club. Inevitable, and they're...
Stepping back, critics argue that the broader progressive agenda in the state appears stalled, recycling familiar proposals without delivering the transformative outcomes once promised. Supporters maintain that reform is still possible within existing institutions, while skeptics doubt whether incremental adjustments will be enough. The pressing issue may not be ideology alone, but whether structural change is necessary to restore public confidence. With mounting economic pressures and voter frustration growing, the debate over California's direction is intensifying, and patience among the electorate is wearing